Piki mai taku manu, kake mai taku manu, tēnā koutou, nau mai rā ki tēnei wahanga o Native Minds. Hoina teiwi mā koutou kua hau mai nei ki roto o Māoriland, te hakarongo ake nei ki enei kōrero, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to Native Minds. This session of Native Minds is commemorating or celebrating Matariki and the issues that are of importance to us at this point in time. And we'll talk about what we're going to talk about very soon, but first, as is the tradition with Native Minds, we'd like to ask our manuhiri to answer 3 questions. What is their tribe, what is their name, and what do they, or what does she believe to be her mission in life? Those 3 questions, Ehua, go.
Tēnā koutou. Ko te aroa toku iwi I whānau mai au ki te rohe o Rotorua, born and raised, and Ngāti Whakaue, Ngāti Uanuka Kōpako, Ngāti Roro o Te Rangi, Oku Hapu, te kia ora koutou. Oh, my mission in life. That's a hard one. I always say that I'm a pacifist, in that I believe all of the world's problems can be solved without violence. But I'm also an activist, in that I'm actively trying to change stuff and building technology that can help us. My mission, or the vehicle if you like, that I've happened to be working in, the medium I happen to be working in at the moment is data, which is information expressed as numbers, and but the mission is to get our people using it. Because, you know, data is a very big topic which we'll broach today, but my mission really is to help our people live a better world. Data, technology, those are just tools we use. But ko te mea nui, ko te tangata.
Tēnā koe hoa, kia ora koe me te ara hakar mārama. Hoi no te take e whakawihui tina I tātou I tēnei rā, e metia nei ko data. Nā, kei te mohe o rā tātou kua puta mai tēnei mea te artificial intelligence, me o nā huaranga katoa. Nā reira, e ahu mai na tēnei mātou rangi I hea. I te puno te ora, I te puno te hori o te tekarane. So, in this information-led society, we're also struck with a lot of disinformation. And in today's talk, we're going to explore data and what that means and how your understanding of data leads to an understanding of the world and enables you to have a life, relationships. But all of that, in a way, is imperiled because of technology and because of the way human beings can be sometimes. So it's terrific to have Ngapera here today as someone who's committed to exploring this new world and coming to terms with data and what we call data sovereignty. So we're going to ask Ngapera to just kick off the kōrero with some of the things that she feels to be important to consider, and then we'll take questions and carry on having a kōrero. Nō reira nau mai rā ki Native Minds. E hoa!
Oh, kia ora. Well, I actually want to start off, if we can go to the next slide, with a bit of a question for the audience. Oh, no, that's me. I will start off with, oh, there you go. That's me, born and raised in Rotorua, and I come from a long line of change makers and activists. So there's all my aunties in the back. That's me down the bottom corner there. I think we had 3 or 4 Pākehā in our school, so I was very privileged. We grew up in a very Māori-centric community. And I was part of, I guess, a generation of activists. You know, our people were marching for our land, our language. And so this is all part of the kohanga reo that went on to it. And these are movements that our whānau were fighting for with very little resources. Quite a few of them ended up in jail. So my father and my grandfather were both arrested at Takaparawa, Bastion Point, in the 70s. And we were part of a lot of land marches growing up, whether it was nuclear waste, becoming nuclear free. We were trying to get the French out of the Pacific Islands because, you know, they're connected to us, and we had a responsibility as tangata whenua to help with that. Even though, you know, it seemed like they were so far away. I remember asking my koro, why are you going over there? You know, and he said, because they need us, bub. No one else is going to stand up, and we have to do it, and we have to lead as tangata whenua, because this could be our waters, and who will help us? Right, so right from young, had this sense of responsibility to others. our kohanga reo movement. We started kohanga reo a little bit earlier than everyone else, and it was just out of aroha, because our aunties and the whae at the time, all voluntary, all doing it because they could see that there was a better way, and a deep belief that change had to happen. So I guess fast forward a few years, when I was thinking, well, what difference am I gonna make? I'm way too pretty to be in jail. Nah, jokes. But, there's got to be a different way to march. There's got to be a different way to make impact. So that's how I learned, that's how I've ended up in this journey to data, which I'll touch on first. But I did want to start with a apartheid for the next question. Here's Maddie. Which is, what if I told you the world was a better place, much better place than it's ever been? Because if we look online and we listen to the news and we look at all the information around us, we think, oh my gosh, we're going into World War III, Ukraine, Russia, the governments are taking over, the world is just going downhill, it's all bad, But actually, that's not the case, is it? So if we look at metrics, when we talk about data, if we look at things like maternal health and child mortality, which is probably one of the key indicators of how well a country is doing. This is how well are your mamas and your babies cared for. We've got lowest rates of child mortality ever in history. We have healthcare for our mamas, for our babies. We have free healthcare till 18 here in New Zealand. There's a lot of good stuff. 2 generations ago, my grandmother's generation even, women couldn't own land. They couldn't have bank accounts. If they were beaten by their husbands, there were nowhere to go. But we can have a look at the data and the information saying, man, actually, we're in a whole different world now. We can run businesses from our phones. We can be filmmakers if we want. It's so I think if we have a look at sometimes the numbers, even though they're just numbers, and data without context can be a bit scary, those numbers really overwhelmingly show us that the world is in a much better place. People are able to travel, just so many things. So, yeah, if we thought we were going doom and gloom with disinformation here, I'm not your girl, because I am an optimist and I love the world. And that's how I got into data, because I could see that there was a mistranslation between what people were feeling and being told in the news, and actually what the numbers are telling us and what the data is saying is the world's actually beautiful. The world is full of opportunity. But yeah, that was my leverage into the world of data. So I will go to the next slide. Sorry, I really over-prepare for these things. But yeah, just to show you, we're surrounded in a world, we are digitally connected now, and the way that we can share information and take information, it's just transformed the whole way that we live. We can connect with whānau overseas, we can learn online, we can do a lot of things. So there's more data than ever before, and this is fundamentally changing how society is interacting, how we are connecting. It's changing everything, but it's not all bad. And so why I love data is that data is a language that holds our stories. That's all it is. But humans, we're not used to speaking in numbers. That's not our natural thing. So how can I be a translator of making numbers not scary, but helping people to understand the power behind data, because it really can help a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. So yeah, to the next slide, please. So this is my day job. I'm the CEO of Figure NZ. We're a charity, we're a data charity, and we basically build technology that takes data from 175 government agencies, and we put it into pictures, into graphs, because that's how people often want to see information in ways that's just usable. We make it shareable. You can digitally share charts online. If you have a look at the site, we've built Māori data hubs, Pacific data hubs, disability data, and it's just organising it into a way that humans can find it, because, we've come a long way. 10 years, we've been advocating for opening information for a long time. Well, that battle's largely won. We know now that information is a good thing to share. So now the battle is, how do we open it in ways that our whānau and our people can actually use it? So I'm sharing all of this because I need people to understand before I go into the disinformation why I'm so passionate about data. And so this is what our charts look like. If you type in Māori population, I like to just start with that because most people they start with seems to be population and place. So this, I love time series charts. It shows us from 1992 to 2022 how much our Māori population has grown. And boy, haven't we grown a lot. So right now, this actually of last year, 869,000 Māori people alive in Aotearoa. That's more Māori people than we've ever had alive in history of the world, which is quite exciting. So 869, we're very strong. Now that's just data that's collected about us, either in census and things. Here's an example of data that's collected and designed by Māori people, and you can see it's quite a little bit different information. But I liked it because this shows how Māori people in New Zealand who feel strongly connected to their tūranga waiwai. And by region, so it was quite cool seeing Northland, they're very strongly connected, Auckland, and just going through the different regions. And to me, that just shows that actually, as a people, we do feel quite connected to our tūranga waiwai, even though the data sometimes will show us that, we're urbanised, we're disconnected. So this gives me a bit of hope that actually, even if people don't speak their reo, they feel like their marae is their tūranga waiwai. This is one I love to show young people when I go and teach data in schools, and I show them what does this information tell us? Because of course behind all these numbers is stories and families and a lot of young people. But it shows the total number of young children and young people charged in court in New Zealand. And I asked the rangatahi, what does this chart show you? And they say, oh, wow, look how much crime dropped off dramatically after that time. And so we just have a discussion about what are those numbers showing without any of us being experts in that space. But the reason is in 2007, we had a policy change in Aotearoa which made it harder to charge young people in court. Obviously, some of our advocates have been saying, well, it's not a good time. We can't have our young people starting their lives with criminal convictions. Let's make it harder to convict our young people. That doesn't necessarily mean crime dropped off. It just means that the number of children charged in court is less, which I think everyone can agree that's a much better thing for our society as a whole. So again, it's just a snippet of data. It's data that's collected all the time. This one is Stats NZ, but I know that the data actually comes from the Ministry of Justice as well. So we'll just click on to the next one. This one makes me a little bit sad, actually, and this is where, I know that we don't like to see Māori data in the deficit thinking, but sometimes this is the reality, right? So this is ethnicity data broken down. This is census data, by the way, and it shows that Māori and Pacific people on the end there, we are much more likely. In fact, I think that says 48% of Māori people have mould growing in their home, which is just quite heartbreaking for me. And there's other data sets there too. So we don't want to be on the end of those statistics. But how would we use this data in a good way? This would be used to show, hey, we need better quality homes, we need more heating, we need affordable sources of heating. So even though the data isn't good sometimes, the data is what the data is. And we can use it to be helpful and advocate and hopefully solve some of these problems. I don't know if I've got anyone. Oh, yep. I thought this was interesting. Again, this is a Māori kaupapa, so I've chosen all Māori data. This, you can see the provider is Ministry of Education. We think that teaching people the source of data is really important to do. So we can see, oh yes, it's come from Ministry of Education. But what that shows you, the light blue is Māori students that attended Māori medium education, and the rest is mainstream. So straight away, without being in education, you can see that our students do way better, right? We're doing, on average, a lot more successful at staying in school. And actually that data point of staying in school till age 17 is a huge indicator of the next step of poverty and other things. So that works. All right, and then I guess to understand Māori data sovereignty, we'll get there in the kōrero. is to say, why is Māori data important, and why should we protect it, and why should we be sharing it, and all those things. Well, all data is important because it helps us understand things. And these are numbers. Data is collected about us and for us all the time, whether we have a baby, or we register our dogs, or we enroll in a course, or we get diagnosed with asthma. All of these things as we go about our daily lives, data and information's being collected. So if we're collecting it and it's our information, why shouldn't we have access to it? Like, why should it be hidden away just for people in government to make decisions, or people in councils? So there's been a big change over even the last 10 years of what data is accessible and what data is not accessible. So we would argue, and I might be a bit biased because I'm part of the Māori Data Sovereignty Network, but all data is important, and Māori data is important too. There's just different ways that we look at it and that we can understand it. So yep, Māori data is important. It can help us solve our own problems, which is the big kaupapa here. How do I empower people to solve their own issues in their own communities? And it's a taonga. So what we fundamentally believe as Māori in the Māori Data Sovereignty Network, which is just a collection, a volunteer group of Māori data experts who fundamentally believe that, heck, all this data is getting open now. How do we actually protect our information as we move into this digital space where everything's getting shared? There are some information, which we'll talk about later, which is tapu and must be protected, and others that should be shared for the benefit of our people. But we have to know what's what, so we have to untangle it. So in a nutshell, data is a taonga. It's of strategic value to Māori. It should be of strategic value to everyone, but we have got it in the Constitution now, so it sits under the Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Article 2. Data is a taonga. We should maintain our own sovereignty over that information. So it's a new thing. We have been advocating for this for quite some years, but it started off a whole worldwide phenomenon now of Indigenous data sovereignty, which is awesome. So yeah, the other thing with data, we know it's valuable. Businesses use it. People commercialise the heck out of it. We sometimes talk about it as the new oil or the new gold. It's how Facebook, all these big companies, they're trading in data. It's worth billions of dollars. I don't think that this is necessarily always a good thing because what it does, it just creates more inequity. So inequity between those who can access and use data and then those who can't. And that's why we set ourselves up as a charity, because we were like, heck, man, there's already inequity in Aotearoa. How do we make sure that our communities, our grassroots people who are actually doing the fundamental change can access the same information that they need to get their funding applications, get their advocacy, and just even understand and build tolerance within their own communities. So yeah, it's a big topic, but it is what it is. It's just like we caught it all before. We live in a capitalist world, unfortunately. It's not our world we want to design for ourselves, but data is commercialised, and that is the world we live in. So how do we navigate it? How do we navigate this world of data when it's just like the pinnacle of money? But that's all right. We do it. We open it for free because we fundamentally believe it's the biggest thing that we can choose to. That's the biggest way we're going to impact our country across all of the industries.
Are you saying that data per se is going to be more a driver of decisions in the future?
Yep, I think it will be.
If we're cold about it without any input from the human dimension.
Oh God, well, humans must be centre of it, right? It's like data's just a thing. Data's just one form of knowledge. To me, I often compare it to te reo Māori, right? Te reo Māori is a taonga. It's a resource. It's one form of knowledge. But if we can learn to communicate in te reo Māori, just like we can learn to communicate in the language of data, it opens up a whole new world of understanding, of being, of doing things that you otherwise can't access if you don't speak the language. You can still be Māori and feel Māori for sure, but anyone that has learned to speak te reo will know, this is a taonga, it's an untapped resource. You can get by without it. You can get by without data for sure. But it's one aspect of knowledge, just like mātauranga Māori is an aspect of knowledge. They're all things that can help us. It seems that with business in particular, you'll hear a lot of things saying, we've got to be data-driven, which kind of irks me a little bit, because actually we should be people-focused, data-informed. That's only one form of knowledge we need to, there's personal experience and connection. So data's just one part of that. So it's not the be-all and end-all, it's not going to fix everything, but I think it's one form of language that we need to, or we should be trying to understand as we go.
One of the most important forms or gatherings of data is, of course, the census. Now, the census
such a geek,
last time, not the one before, was a disaster that still, I can't figure out how they allowed that to happen.
I know.
I think the figure is now closer to 90%. We're finally getting to 90% with regard to the Māori uptake. Why are our people suspicious of data, or is the other means of gathering data not up to the job?
Great questions. Well, actually, I just got the data. Well, I've been getting daily census updates because we're in the space. And particularly, I've been excited about it for our rainbow community, our disability community. They've been missing data sets for a long time. And census gives us really important information. As you know, that's how we fund our communities and schools and electoral boundaries. So that's a big deal. But yes, the official stats at the moment, released yesterday, 89% of the country is filled out. That's a lot better overall than what the 2018 census. And Pacific people are now over 82% respondents. That's a huge increase from the 65% of the last census. And Māori are up at 80%. So we've got really, really good, it's just heartening for me, because that was one of the things I was getting anxious over lockdowns and pandemics, which we'll talk about shortly, was, oh man, if our people don't trust and they're going to disengage from census without knowing it, they're impacting their own communities. So yeah, the second question was, is it a matter of collecting it?
Yeah.
Yes. I believe so. Because, this year they had a lot more Māori and Pacific people collecting the data, sitting down with people, helping them, talking through the questions. And that's fundamental, right, for our people. And so the way we collect data is so important, and down to the types of data we collect. So, yeah.
I mean, you talk about the sources of data, and you made a reference before, okay, that's from government, so you can trust that. A, is that so? And B, for those who don't yet have the filters to understand what data is good, what clues are there for the ordinary person to have a fair idea as to what is valuable or good data or not?
Yeah, oh gosh, I mean, that's a subjective question, but and it's hard for Māori to trust government, right? Inherently, we haven't had the best history, so I can understand why our people in some senses would just be like, why would I give data to them, and why should I trust the information that comes? So after having worked in government data, and I'm very sceptical myself, I can honestly say that the data that the government has at the moment, it goes through so much filter. There is so much care taken, even with boring things such as definitions. And any data that you find on Figure NZ, by the way, has all the metadata attached. So if you go and see those charts, you can go down and see, why was that data collected, who collected it, was it a survey, was it part of a registration, are there any definitions that are missing, are there limitations? Sometimes there's warnings on the data. So for Pacific data that was taken from census, we've got a warning on it just saying, hey, use this with a little bit of care, because a lot of people didn't get that through. So by and large, you can trust government data. I know it feels very hard to say, but I can just saying that because they actually do care about getting it right. And also, we've had advocates in the Māori data space advocating for better data collection for many, many years now. So they're starting to care more, and they didn't even used to publish ethnicity data. Now we've got a lot of it. So when we first built the Māori Data Hub in 2020, because I couldn't believe that nothing existed. I think we started off with about 1,200 charts just of Māori data across education and all the things. But now there's like 6,500. And that is just because we've been hunting for it and saying, hey, why haven't you guys got Māori data? Have you got ethnicity data? Have you got Māori Pacific data? And they'll say, oh yeah, but we haven't published it. So I say, I will publish it for you. So yeah, it's about finding it sometimes, and it's about opening it at other times. Because got to keep in mind, public data even 10 years ago wasn't built for the public. The open data movement's very new. So when all of a sudden when governments had to open their data for the first time, I think they were freaking out and going, holy shit, this data is not meant for sharing. What if it gets used in these bad ways? Or what if people, so they really, really care about getting it out there. So yes, you can trust it. And the cool thing about it is because the metadata's there, you can question it. And if you're not quite happy with it, you can go back and say, hey, what's up with this information? But if that information wasn't there in the first place, we couldn't question it. Yeah. So by and large, you can trust government data. It's not perfect. No data is perfect. But yeah, it's always good to look at what are the sources. And also, why is it being shared? Because sometimes humans put their own agenda onto the data. So we might be looking for something that proves what we already believe, and we find the closest data set that we go, oh, that shows, I don't know, what we were talking about, the National Party, and, all of a sudden crime's gone up. It hasn't gone up. But, they will play on these things because it suits their agenda, because they want people to trust them to be the new government. Yeah. So they're using data as something to promote their agenda. But actually, if you know data, you can have a look at the crime data and go, actually, crime's been reducing.
Therein lies the problem, because most people don't understand the fact of the data and the fact of the statistics, and so political parties can barrel on, relying on people's ignorance, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. And that is where we come into this disinformation corridor, which we'll touch on soon. But before then, I just wanted to have a note. There's lots of different data when we talk about data, right? Data is not all equal. And when we talk about data sovereignty and how we protect our information and what information we should share for the benefit of our communities, we have to break it into, at the very simplest form, personalised information. So that's information like my name, my address, my children, my health data, credit card data, where I live, all of that sensitive information about me that can be attributed to me. So for me, I think that is tapu, or not so much tapu, but that's data that's personalised. It must be protected. We've got to be very, very careful and when you see data that is published, like 869,000, we're all in there, but there's no way that you could look at that data set and identify anyone. Do you know what I mean? So it's aggregated data that is just taken, and it's just information, but there's no way that you can, really, point the finger, if you like. For example, if we were opening abortion data about a town as small as Otaki, well, they don't open it at that level, specifically because if there's only a few thousand people in your town, you can start to make assumptions. Now, that's not the purpose of public data, so quite often they'll only publish it up to like Wellington region level for that reason. But yeah, when we talk about data and how we share it and how we care for it, that's just keep in our minds. There's personalised information and there's everything else. Yeah, so we do need to care for each of those data sets appropriately. That's where tikanga around the data will come in.
Are there any questions that people have to? While we're on that point about tikanga, what are the relevant tikanga that enable you to work with data to, I suppose, and this is leading us into the sovereignty. I mean, how does tikanga work with regard to protecting the sovereignty of data?
Yeah, well, it's a whole new space. As you know, it's a new frontier, and that's why I'm very grateful to our academics, actually. Kiri Kōwhai Makaere, Dr. Tahu Kukutai, Maui Hudson, there's quite a few. And they've been thinking about this for a long time. What is the tikanga? Well, I mean, I think it's like, with a Māori viewpoint anyway, it's more like, well, we shouldn't own the data, but how do we be kaitiaki of it? How do we care for this information in a way that's going to be protected, and in a way that's not going to harm our people, but in a way that can be used to help our people and used for opportunity. And it's changing all the time, and we need to keep on top of it. That's why we need people with all kinds of knowledge in the data space, because there's some of it, like me, I specialise in opening it and teaching people how to use it, and then there's other people that specialise in how do we protect this data. And so in the data sovereignty world, there's a little bit of tension there, because even so, for example, when I opened the Māori Data Hub, people were like, hey, what are you doing? You're opening up the data. We're trying to protect it. And I say, yeah, but we need it. I'm opening up data that's already open. I'm just putting it in a way that people can use it. The stuff we should be worried about is the data from Ministry of Social Development, the data from Ministry of Justice, the personalised, the sensitive information. We need to protect that. How do we protect our whakapapa data? How do iwi collect data about their people without relying on census? Those are the things. So I think it's a conversation for each iwi to have, and some of our bigger iwi with resources are already thinking about how they are kaitiaki of their data. And in one way, you've got to think about how you store it all, right? But then access is the next thing. And so one of the things that is confusing with the Māori data space is that people say, oh, well, all Māori data on one extreme side, all Māori data should sit with Māori and we should be sovereign over it. And, but then I say, well, how does someone who's Māori that doesn't know their whakapapa access it? What's the verification process that we need to take in order for somebody to access information? So these are all things that are being discussed, that are being talked about, and actually the tikanga is developing as we go. But there are a set of guiding principles around Māori data sovereignty, and that's why you'll see us in government, we're advocating for one part, that they collect better data about our people, because they have to collect it anyway, and we know we can't afford to do it, so the government should care, and they do, to be honest. They do care about good information, because it makes them look bad if they don't. No, but they do genuinely care. And on the other hand, how do we protect that really, that whakapapa data, that personalised information about our people?
What is the tikanga we need to protect the truth of data? I mean, we're bombarded by stories, particularly from the media or from politics or from anywhere really, that have a highly selective use of the facts, of the data for particular ends. What sort of filters do we need to keep an eye out for this disinformation, for this?
I know. Well,
let alone the AI, where la kōrero hori katoa.
Aye. Well, actually, I think if we could go to the next slide, I just wanted to. I kind of try to break up. Usually I would do this in a workshop, and I would say to people, which side do you think that the information should sit on, whether it's whether tapu or noa is the right kupu here, but tapu in the fact that it should be protected, it's personalised information, it's quite, it's important. If people get that information, they can not just target you with ads, which is what it's usually been used for, but, it can be used against you, people, or on what side. So what is sacred? You've got people shaking their booties online now. You've got people filming tangihanga. The lines are becoming very blurred between what is tapu and what is noa. Sharing, and we're in a sharing economy where we're used to sharing our thoughts and feelings. Māori land data has just been released on the Māori land courts. It's in all different formats, so the hope is that it's easier for people to access. Some people might think Māori land data is tapu, and that it should sit on the other side, and that that only that shouldn't be open. So it's subjective a little bit between what is and what isn't, but I think it's questions we have to keep asking, and the examples of it will keep showing itself as we go. But over lockdown, we saw a lot of disinformation starting to show, and so if we could go to the next slide. Oh, we're still back on tikanga and kawa. I think I added these in late last night, but that's just, how we share. I was looking at the process of how Māori data is collected. What is that tikanga? Is there a tikanga around there? And there's really clear definitions of what Māori data is, a process for how ethnicity data is collected and shared. So these tikanga actually already exist, but we can only really manage it, thank you Te Tiriti o Waitangi, because we have a say in how government opens it. Now, commercialised data, Facebook, banks, insurance companies, we've got no say. And actually, they hold on to that data. So we don't know things like how many Māori have applied for mortgages, how many people put up their homes to start businesses. Like, this is all commercialised data now, so that's another world. But hopefully what we're doing, and I've been working with places like Amazon Web Services, is a process of how do they show people how to care for their Māori data, and where should it sit, and should they be sharing it with others. So yeah, kawa is important, and the way which you carry out, the way which you share data, the tools that we build to help people, that's the kawa around the data. But we'll move on from there, that's all right. That's a whole thesis in itself, isn't it? So when we touch on what is data sovereignty, when we think about what is land sovereignty, that's when we have our land and we're in full control of our land and we can make full decisions over it, yeah? So what is data sovereignty? It's the same thing. It's just, can I access my information when I need it? So if I go to my doctor and I say, can you print me out a whole list of my health records or whatever, yes, they have to share that. But only because there's laws in place to do that. So we have 3 laws that we're under. The Privacy Act is one. So they have to keep your data private, particularly your personal information. But it also means if you need that access to it, that you can have access to your information. So it's not full data sovereignty, but it's better than not being able to access your information or your information being used other ways.
Just because quickly, are Pākehā as interested in their
yes.
data?
Yes.
No difference, yeah.
So often I talk about Māori data sovereignty. I could just take the Māori part off there, because actually everyone should be concerned about their data sovereignty. The odd thing is that people are up in arms about data sovereignty, but then they're giving away their stuff on Facebook. They're filling out these, questionnaires. It's just data mining. People are mining your data. They're paying websites in China, handing over their credit card details willy-nilly. Address details. We're giving away information all the time. So I think really it's about, we need to be very mindful in this digital space, what we're sharing, who we're sharing it with. Because people are just so used to just giving everything, photos of kids. And I love seeing photos of people's kids. But if I had my friend Karaitiana Taioru here, and he has a very different perspective of Māori data sovereignty and all of that, he would say, oh, Carl, you don't put that stuff online. But I'm like, oh, how else do we connect? So it's an interesting space to discover. And again, it comes down to that personal information and the aggregate. So data sovereignty is a big issue, but I don't think it's something we should be worried about. I just think it's being mindful as we go into the space, and as AI and the digital world, things are just going to get better and easier. We just have to be mindful, because we don't want it to be used against us. At the moment, I quite like it when Facebook and stuff surface me ads or things that I like, or, it knows I'm looking for a Pacific holiday. So, I quite like that. Some people get annoyed because they think they're being spied on, but I'm like, actually, I think that's quite helpful. It's quite good. So data sovereignty, big kaupapa, but it's not a scary kaupapa. It's just about, how do we, like back in the day, how do we protect our arts and all of that? Well, these are just these are questions we have to think about, and it will change as we go.
What are your thoughts with regard to IP and data?
Well,
Whether it's fungibles or whatever.
yeah, gosh, I haven't really thought about that one so much. I mean, intellectual property, it's just so crazy, right? Because we want to own our intellectual property, but then we're just so used to putting everything out there. I still don't understand NFTs, because to me, and I'm not that advanced, but I'm just like, so you're going to pay for a digital copy? Like, people can just copy it. Right? I think it's a really important space for artists. I think musicians went through it a few years ago when music just became free and everything just got put on Spotify and YouTube, and consumers just became used to free stuff. But it just meant that artists had to change. We had to change the way that we're working. We had to change the way that deals are done. Did it give more? Yeah, it's an interesting space. But
in the previous conversation, a night of my session, we talked about art curation and curators being more kaitiaki rather than curators.
Aye.
What is an equivalent kind of whakaaro in this space? I would imagine that this is kaitiaki territory.
I think it is. And that's when I talk about data sovereignty. I'm trying to get people to think about, how are you caring for your information? How are you caring for it? Are you surfacing for people who collect data? Are you sharing it in ways that are useful? Are you thinking about thinking about what data you keep, or how you share it? How are we being good kaitiaki of information? Because there's information coming at us left, right and centre. So we have to think about ways that it is all about kaitiakitanga.
Are we getting swamped by all the data from overseas? Is that making it difficult for us to have these conversations?
It is what it is. We are in the age of data. It's everywhere. Our movies, our photos are data. They're all compressed down into pixels, and that's how we share them online. And so, I don't think we need to be too worried. I think we need to just be mindful.
And being mindful is part of the messaging. You talk about being a positive personality, and if you look at some of the facts about the state of the planet and our species, many things are better. Do you have any whakaaro with regard to the messaging of data?
I do, and I think that it's a huge responsibility for media. I think it's a huge responsibility for people in that space to manage it. Now with AI, that's going to complicate it. Can we go to the next slide, please? Sorry, Maddie. Or what is disinformation? Just on that question, because it's everywhere, right? And it's quite overwhelming. There's a few times over lockdown where I was like, what am I even doing? Why am I busting my gut to open data and help people with data literacy if people are just going to get sucked in? My core purpose was being hammered. I got really upset about it, actually, deeply thinking, because I could just see all around in my whānau getting sucked into these things. And, people say, oh, Māori don't get sucked into disinformation. No, we're all good. And I'm thinking, are you sure? Because disinformation, misinformation is one thing. About 50% of adults share misinformation. Disinformation is data, it's news and information that's designed to hurt and harm. It's very dangerous. Misinformation is often when people just take that and they share it. So they don't mean to hurt or harm, they don't mean to share that, but it is still harmful, because the more that we see images or we hear a rhetoric, the more it sticks in our brain. So people often ask me, so what are some modern day examples of Māori and misinformation? And if we could go to the next slide. Oh, carry on, we'll go to the next one. Sorry, I'm not going to break that down. Or the next one. Oh, we'll go to the next one too. Oh, sorry, carry on. If I had my thing. So here are some modern day things. Misinformation's dangerous, right? It can cause major mistrust, not just in your government, but in your society in general. So during lockdown, so this is 15 May 2020, I think we were only 3 months into the lockdown. It was a pretty scary time, right? We were right in the throes of like not even being able to go to the supermarket, basically. So this has happened, and I could see online people going nuts about 5G, and I'm thinking, hey, I'm on the, 5G's good. Don't you want better, better cell phone access? But people were really genuinely worried. Oh my God, and I could see them sharing images from overseas, like, oh, this is in Whakatane, and I'm thinking, no, it's not. That's Iowa or wherever it is. But you could see this rhetoric. And so the impact of that, well, I mean, for me, was the fear. I could sense fear in my whānau's voice. They were worried that their children and their whānau were going to get hit by 5G gamma rays or whatever it was. Like, it was a genuine concern. Now, they're sharing all this information because they're genuinely worried. And for most of us who can sense or understand this information, you're sitting there going, oh my gosh. And no matter what I could say or what information I could share, I couldn't shake that fear. So it was the anxiety that disinformation caused. But then actually, some little bugger around the corner from me in Manurewa put this 5G tower on fire. So we're in Manurewa, it's acknowledged as a poor community. I think it's a great community. But, at the time where we needed connection, learning, working from home, and we really needed that connection, these fellas are burning down towers, thinking that they're helping some way. So it really impacted, particularly the Māori community, really bad. And I mean, that may be because my community is the Māori community, so I could see it really hitting. But yeah, this was totally an example of disinformation that came from America that just... And I could see what it was doing. You could see that, oh man, they're starting to do this mistrust in government thing again. The irony is the government doesn't do internet. It's all privately owned in Aotearoa, so the government had nothing to really do with it. But next picture. Now here's a real life implications of misinformation. And I was looking at immunisation data. And again, it just caused so much anxiety in a time where we were in a public health crisis, and a lot of our Māori health providers were trying to protect and immunise whānau against, this disease that shut down our borders. It was just such a crazy time. Look at that. Look at that drop in immunisation. That's across everyone. Even the Asians fell for it. Our Asian community, and for years, we've been doing pretty good. So this is at 18 months of age, so if your children are immunised right up. So it wasn't just COVID, it's impacted communities. And if you break the immunisation rates down, which I can do on Figure NZ, and you go to Te Tairāwhiti or Bay of Plenty or areas with high Māori populations, it's a big deal. Our kids aren't being immunised. Again, this isn't to say that people were dumb or falling for it. It was fear, and it was misinformation that was driven through, shared through celebrities, health nuts, or the crunchies as we call them. They're all people trying to do good things and who believed they were doing the right thing. But we can see this is now the impact. Look at that. Boom, that's a big drop. That's a big data point drop. So these are instances when disinformation are actually impacting our communities. Next slide. That's everything, measles, mumps, all of the things. So it's not just COVID.
Yeah, but wouldn't they, so I mean this is a conundrum, because wouldn't you look at that, because it's how we interpret the data, wouldn't we look at that perhaps if you were, and say, wow, what a success.
I guess so. I guess so, right? And that's it, because we're all... we all have different ways of viewing the world, right? And each of those ways is important. I guess I'm just trying to show the impact of misinformation because, obviously even a few years before that, people were immunising their children and, without much fear and without much. So I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just having a look at how misinformation has... Yeah, I think it was. And that was a really another sad. My heart broke for those babies over there because, again, those people were just trying to protect and do the right thing. But that resulted in deaths of little ones. So that's...
But that's what I'm saying, the data is how you use the data.
Yes.
How people use the data for whatever purpose they want to.
If I was an anti-vaxxer, or I shouldn't say that word, it's probably not a good word, but I'd be like, man, look what we did. That's fantastic, right? So it is...
When you look at that data set and the data set of, say, those children that have been hospitalised or...
Yeah. And the data, and that probably won't show until another 10 years, yeah, we hope it doesn't, but look, that's the thing. Next slide, please. Here's another really crazy one that I saw, particularly among my own communities, and we all consider ourselves as environmentalists. Our dock workers, even our own Māori whānau who are trying to protect their forests, from the decimation of possums and all the other things, we're getting attacked by the people who think that 1080 is bad and it's a poison. And it is a poison, and it is bad, but I just wanted to show that, these are real life impacts, and it went really fast. I'm not sure if you have whānau who are on the anti-1080 bandwagon, but I certainly do, and I've got lots of whānau who aren't into vaccinations either, but again, you could see that same rhetoric, the same messaging coming through, and a lot of hatred towards government and DOC. And, and even when the scientific community came forward and said, hey, no, this is actually the best way that we currently have. If we didn't do 1080, our forests would be decimated within 3 years. It just didn't matter. They fundamentally had already made up their minds that it's a bad thing. And so, yeah, people are actually getting hurt by it. So, look, 264 threats and assaults since 2019. That's a direct... It's data and it's disinformation. So the information they're sharing, it's just sharing it would be like saying putting chlorine in drinking water's poison. It's poisoning the public. Well, we know chlorine's a poison. If you have it in big quantities, it will hurt you. But actually you need it to... So there's just the result of misinformation being shared about that. And sometimes it doesn't matter if you've made up your mind that a thing is bad. Unfortunately, all the data in the world can't bring you back from that. But it's just something we have to be aware of.
Do you have a view on how data should be protected or looked after so that the bad faith actors don't have their way? Even if that's a possibility.
Oh no, I fundamentally ask myself this question all the time, but I keep coming back to the only way we can fight bad information is to keep putting good information into the ether. It's the only thing. It's like only love can conquer hate, or it's the only way. So we have to keep putting good information. So actually, in the throes of my depression and anxiety through lockdown, it just actually strengthened my resolve. And I thought, man, if AI is coming and everyone's going to be doing their stuff by ChatGPT and other methods, I've got to keep putting out good quality data into the ether so that the good data will come out. I think that's the only way we can. Humans are humans. They're going to fundamentally do what they want to do. But and education, that's the other thing, right? We've got to teach our people what to look for.
Yeah. But humans
we go.
Humans do have the capacity to love, which is something that the computer doesn't have.
Totally.
So that can still be the point of difference.
I think so too. And that's why people working in technology too, the ethics of everything has got to underpin. Mostly I believe most humans are good. There's a couple of bad actors that are in there. They're the ones causing the disinformation.
Yeah.
But I think if you understand, I know what to look for now. So I pick it out a million miles away. And I think if you're armed with a few skills and just checking yourself. So things like if I get irate, I see something online or content posted and I think I have a real visceral reaction, I actually stop myself now and think, Why did I have that reaction? Is it because somebody wanted me to have that reaction? And why do they want me to have that reaction, right? Because they want you to be angry. They either want you to like their post or share it or whatever they want to do. But if I have a visceral reaction now, it's a little thing to check myself, a little flag. Oh, should I be sharing that? Should I not?
In that light, what is a kind of couple of tips for data literacy?
Oh, yes.
If you like
I think I have a list pre-written if we go to the next slide. Oh, and this is just one way I thought, this is what we were seeing, right? We were seeing our tino rangatiratanga flags with the Trump flags, and we were seeing all of the fringe parts of community, which in any other sense I would have thought, man, that's really quite cool. But they were banded under this thing of misinformation that binded everyone. Yeah. Look, we got the mango mobs, we got everyone. And I'm not saying that was bad. I think I love protests. We're from a country of protests, and I think, yeah, good on you. You know, if you have something to say, go say it. But it was just interesting to see that American rhetoric just come right through, and how it engaged everyone. Oh, it's crazy. It's a very special time, but it was very worrying, especially for us in the data space when you see how it's being used. Sorry, I think that was just an example of how quickly it got here too. It really got here quickly. So I just write some tips because I like to end with some practical things of, you know, how we can even get our kids and our rangatahi to think about what they're sharing, because and it might be very basic, and so apologies if it does come across that, but like the first thing is check before you share information online. You know, is it designed to be inflammatory? Is it designed to make you get aroused? Because that's what media's job is sometimes. And they want the likes, they want to be first to market, and that's okay. But just check before. It's okay to share information. We love the sharing of information, but we should check. A lot of people I see, they don't even read the article, they don't even watch the video. They just are inflamed by that first sentence, and then they share it. It's like, whoa, calm down, be a bit careful. So yeah, you can avoid it. Just even that one thing. If you think about 50% of adults are sharing misinformation, it's up to us to stop it, right? They've got to have our own filters at some point. Have you read the article? Have you watched the video before you share it? Have you actually thought about what you are sharing online? When it comes to data or research or whatever, check your sources. Where does it come from? I saw another really interesting example of disinformation over lockdown with the Rau Kumara Rangers, which is up near Te Kaha and that. And it was all done really beautifully around how they're protecting their land. And I could sense some anti-1080 thing coming through. And I thought, well, that's a bit of a worry because those rangers really need, you can't walk, you know, they're very, very steep ranges. But then the misinformation started coming where they started using one of our researchers, Tina Ngata, who's beautiful, and the hatred, and that just started like she was fully doxed, but it was all coming from Māori profiles. Now these weren't Māori profiles, they were Pākehā, so I was reporting it and I was trying to warn people on there, but you know, they just took it really, really quickly, and all of a sudden one of our sisters is being harmed on there. So check the sources. Where is this research coming from? Where is the data that you're sharing coming from? Another good thing is to check the source, you know. Where has it come from? Has it come from Fox News? Or if it's actual data, where has it come from? Has it come from a survey done by the Tauranga Council of Taxpayers Association, or something like that? Where is that? Who's collected it? Also, why is it being shared? Is it being shared for public good? Is it being shared because it wants to make money? Like just really asking questions. And then asking good questions. I think that's the biggest thing in data. And I think for a while now we've been in the knowledge economy. Well, I think now we're moving into the question economy. Are we asking good questions of the data that's out there? Are we asking good questions of our leaders? Are we asking ChatGPT good questions? Because this is the age we live in. We got knowledge at our fingertips now, and it's mostly free. But we have to filter ourselves, and we have to teach our kids to filter. And I think the last one is just care about the truth. I mean, the truth can be manipulated, data can be manipulated, but if we as humans care about what is the truth, what is right or wrong, and even when you work in data, you know it's not perfect, so you use the data accordingly. You know, you say, okay, I'm going to use this information about Pacific women and whatever, but I'm going to use it knowing that that doesn't represent all of them, only some of them have participated. So you're just a little bit more wary, a bit more careful, and and also just understanding what misinformation is. You know, I think a lot of our whānau, they got so swept up, I'm talking about my whānau in particular, they got so swept up in the emotions and the fear and all of the stuff that we were hearing online and sharing. You know, I just think about how anxious that made them, how scared, and in a time we were already worried, and that's not good for the wairua. But if they knew a little bit about what information was and why it's been shared, they just might be a little bit more careful.
Wow, kei te tuahine mi hea tuana ki a koe, te nui o te kaupapa.
Ai.
Te whānui, te hohonu e ngori i mārama noa i a au kupu mai ki a mātu i tini rangi noa reira kei te mea tura ki a koe. It's kind of daunting. This is such a big subject, but towards the beginning of your kōrero, when you talked of the need to be positive and the need to be loving, for myself, as I look at your checklist there, one of the things I feel that I'm feeling is when I'm reading or consuming stuff, I'm aware of what they're trying to make me feel. Are they trying to make me feel angry? Are they trying to make me feel anti or whatever? And that's just something I'm just becoming more and more aware of. Not just the sources, but what emotion or response is being elicited by this type of story. And at the end of the day, I think that love will fix and smooth things out. And we do need to see the loving stories. We need to see the more positive stories just to give the balance and to show that there is a better way than the fear and all the conflict that's promised by our media and by our TV programs and delivered up by the news, which is a bit sad really, but it is an interesting time that we have to sort of recalibrate everything, really.
And bring our people back into it, you know, like the technology. I think it's exciting. I think there's so much opportunity happening both in the data space, the tech space, artificial intelligence. I mean, I guess I'm in tech, so I'm a bit biased, but it's cool. It's cool. We just have to learn. And I think as Māori, we're resilient. We've been through heaps, and humans in general, we'll get back up and carry on and probably make something fantastic while we're at it. You know, but the future is bright. I don't think we have to worry about AI, but we still should all be in touch with those feelings, because at the end of the day, you know, we want to have this life's beautiful, and there's opportunity, and we want to create a better future for our children. And I think every generation has said that, and every generation should worry about that. But I think data is just one way we can help.
And as you said, every generation over history, we are getting it slowly better.
Yeah.
Kei te tua he ne whakau e winu kōpako tēnā koe, tēnā koe. Hoi no tēnā koe tō katoa, tēnā koe tō ki te kāinga, ara kai kōrā koe tō. Thank you for coming to support Native Minds. Next week on the 8th of July, we'll be having Dr. Rangi Mātāmua coming to speak to us about Matariki. That's on the 8th of July at 1 p.m. But for now, please give our thanks to Ngapera Riley.